Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Package versus Custom Application Testing. I'm Mark Beebe, Marketing Campaign Manager for Worksoft, and your host for today's session. First, a couple of logistical points. We have a large number of people on the call today, so the lines will be muted, but we will take your questions toward the end of this 60-minute broadcast. Please use the question feature to submit questions at any time during the webinar. For questions we can't get to during the Q&A session, we'll be sure to get back to you with an email reply. We will also make a link to the recording of this webinar available for registrants who were unable to make it, or perhaps for colleagues you think might benefit from the material. Let me now introduce our speaker. We are privileged to have Shoaib Javed with us today. Shoaib is Worksoft's Chief Technology Officer and is responsible for technology strategy, software development, quality assurance, and customer support. In his role as Worksoft CTO, Shoaib works with global Fortune 1000 companies to help them define and execute their overall automation strategy. During his diverse 20-year career, Shoaib has successfully led the development of next-generation enterprise software, digital media, and converged telecommunications solutions. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Shoaib.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Our topic today is package versus custom application test automation. And we'd like to share with you our perspectives from our customers, our major partners, because we've been doing this for a while and we have learned a few things that we believe would be really interesting for you to consider when you do test automation for packaged applications. So it's my birthday today, and I think at 25 years of age, I seem to have a new perspective on life. And, you know, the more I believe things change, the more they remain the same. So I'm going to try something slightly different on this webinar today. So I'd like to use the question tab as a two-way communication mechanism. So I'm going to ask you a question on the webcast, and I'd like you to respond through the question tab, respond your answers on the question tab, okay? You can ask your questions on the question tab, but when I ask a question, please send me your responses on the question tab. So let's try this and see if this works. So the first question that I have is very simple. What is a packaged application? Okay? So the question is, what is a packaged application? Please send me back your responses through the question tab. All right. And while I collect the responses, we'll go through the rest of the slides, and then I'll stop and see what you guys have said. Okay. So our agenda today, we're starting with, what's digital transformation? What do you have to consider when doing digital transformation? Why would you do it in the first place? We'll then talk about the differences between approaching packaged applications versus custom applications. We'll then talk about what do you want to prioritize when testing packaged apps. And then the last part is I'd like to broaden our perspective just a little bit and talk about what else can you do in terms of automation when you're looking at packaged applications beyond testing, okay? So I'm going to start with my favorite quote, and I think this sums up digital transformation nicely. So this is a quote by Charles Darwin, and of course it has applied since the beginning of life and applies, I think, even more now than it ever did. So it's not about being the strongest or the fastest or the most intelligent, but about being able to adapt to change the fastest. And so what happens if you don't? Well, this is what happens. You get disrupted. So the business pages are filled with obituaries of companies that waited too long to act. If you're not able to act quickly, if you're not able to change everything, if you're not able to disrupt yourself, then be sure that somebody else is going to disrupt you. And if you look at some of the statistics, you can see that, right? You can see that, most people don't even know what their industries are going to look like in the next 3 years. Everyone feels threatened that some startup is going to disrupt the 100-year-old business that they're in, And the other thing that's really interesting, that I talked about earlier is you have half the Fortune 500 companies that have disappeared since the year 2000. So this ability to change quickly, to adopt quickly, is what's the core driver for digital transformation. So when you look at digital transformation, package applications are a key piece because every company today is a software company. Every business uses a great deal of technology to actually run their business. And making sure that these packaged applications run well, that you have streamlined operations, that you're able to deliver those projects quickly, and that you're able to manage technology risk is critical. So once again, 26% of ERP projects are viewed as failures. You have 75% of ERP projects that exceed their budgets. And that is not a good sign because you got to make sure that you can do this as efficiently as possible. And ERP itself is evolving, right? It's not anymore about single, large, monolithic applications. It's much more likely that your ERP landscape is a whole set array of applications that are interconnected together and are changing and are deployed in more complex ways to run your business. So think about packaged apps as being a larger number of smaller applications, a larger percentage of which are going to be deployed from the cloud and are going to be interconnected in more complex ways. So that's how you got to think about the packaged application space. Okay, so I'm going to stop at this slide and see what you guys said about packaged applications. All right, so the first two answers, what's the packaged application? The answer I got back was SAP. Interesting. Well, that's a good example of a packaged application. And yeah, I mean, it looks like it's synonymous with packaged application when you say SAP. Someone said externally developed software. I think that's a great description, externally developed software. Pre-configured standardized app. Purchase solution OOTD. I don't know what OOTD means, but purchase solution. Software you buy ready to use, in brackets, hopefully. Okay, I like that. That's the one I could go with. Software that you buy ready to use, hopefully. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have? We have packaged application, a standard app, easier to test and automate. Large custom enterprise software development for broad market use. Okay. So again, to sort of summarize your responses on packaged apps, I think a packaged app is simply an application that you buy from somebody else and use for some business purpose. So it's not an application that you build yourself, it's something that you buy from someone else. And then you deploy it, configure it, integrate it to help you run your business. Okay? So how do we need to think about packaged applications as opposed to custom development? And one analogy that works well for us, for me especially, is think about what you have to do when you're building a house versus managing and running a city. So building a house is a pretty self-contained process, right? You have a set of specs, you have a team of people, you go ahead and you focus on building one set of functionality and making sure that you meet the specs that you start with, that you built your house with. Okay, that's analogous to building a single software application. But what if you manage a large city, right? What if you manage a big city that had hundreds of neighborhoods, that had streets, that had buildings, that had large interconnections? So that's what it feels like to run a packaged enterprise application landscape. It's like a city. The projects are more complex. You have to make sure that the city doesn't come to a halt when you do a new project. So you got to make sure the traffic is still flowing. You got to make sure everything is still running as you're doing new projects. And of course, there are some really old, dilapidated neighborhoods, and there are brand new glass buildings and all of that has to function together well. So the packaged application problem then becomes, how do I efficiently run a city where I might be doing large projects and do so without disruption to the business, okay? So the life cycle is a little bit different here, right? So in a typical software development life cycle, you start with requirements, you develop architecture, you then build, you do unit testing, you do integration testing, and so on, and then deployment, right? But when you run packaged applications and you do a packaged application project, you already have software to begin with. So the first thing you do is you deploy that software and you configure it within your environment to see what you get out of the box. You then figure out what the gap is, right? What do you have to customize and where do you have to integrate to meet your requirements? You then add in whatever small custom functionality and you try to avoid customizations as much as possible. So you do that and then you deploy it into production. So a lot of packaged application work is focused more on operations and running your business than it is on software development. And so therefore you got to think about testing also in that respect. Because if you test a packaged application like you test custom software, you'll never be done. Because you assume that the vendor of the packaged application has already tested that packaged application. So what you're looking to do here is making sure that your business works on top of multiple packaged applications seamlessly. So the focus here becomes more on the business process, the business outcomes, what end users are doing, as opposed to making sure that every feature or every aspect of one single application works. Okay, so given that, what should be your test automation considerations? And I'll go through this in a minute, but I want to ask my next question, right? My next question to you is, how do you think organization structure impacts packaged application testing? Okay, so if you have any opinions on that topic, send in your responses to the question tab. So the question once again is, how do you think organizational structures impact packaged application testing? Okay, so while you're doing that, let's move on. So from our perspective, right, what are the main considerations for test automation for packaged applications? I think the first one, it's very self-explanatory, right? But it's subtle, right? It's understanding. So understanding what to test, I believe, is 60 to 70% of the problem. Because if you test the wrong thing, it doesn't matter how much you test or what kind of volume you have in testing, it's going to be useless. So the first part about doing testing for packaged applications is understanding how your end users are using applications, understanding how you run your business, understanding how business processes and their variations work. So the business is a key component to drive that understanding and then take that as the first step in doing anything else. The second part is, we already discussed this in the houses versus cities slide, is dealing with complexity. So making sure that when you deploy functionality into production, you don't have unintended consequences, right? You don't have a small change creating a domino effect and bringing down some major aspect of your business, right? So understanding that complexity and making sure that you have covered the business scenarios is critical, right? So the first part is understanding what's important. What are the business processes you need to test? Why do you want to test them? What are the variations? How is your business run in your company? The complexity, and then the user interface, the user experience, right? So here, again, in the custom development world, UI-driven testing may not be a large component of what you do. But for packaged applications, for making sure that your business works, for making sure that the user experience is right, UI-driven testing, I believe, is the most important thing, because if you don't exercise functionality, the way that end users are going to use those applications, the way that end users are going to run your business for you, or the way your customers are going to interact with your, outward-facing portals, you are actually not going to be able to succeed, right? So critical that you pay a lot of attention to the user interfaces, to the user experience, to end users. This is very important, and we'll get into some of this in the next few slides. Okay, so understanding. How do you get understanding? Right? How do you figure out how your business actually works? Well, one way to do it is to ask, right? Which may not be the most efficient way to do, but you may have to figure out who actually knows about business processes, and then you have to find out all of those people within all of the distributed functional structures to say, okay, well, here's how my end-to-end business process works. Here's how my order-to-cash process works, or my procure-to-pay process works, or my supplier management or warehousing or whatever. And so the only way to figure out how your business works is to actually look inside people's heads or have them write you documents, which they'll never do, and then try to get their understanding. So this is not an easy process, right? That's why I keep emphasizing this. Getting this right and applying automation to this process is just as important, right? So if you're going to do test automation, the first part of test automation is understanding automation, and I'll get into what understanding automation means. Right? How do you automate understanding, and what kind of tools and techniques can you use that are available to you today to automate the understanding of business processes is critical, and we'll talk about this. So first thing is just understanding the business. The second is complexity, right? And this, again, once you understand, you can derive the complexity from that understanding. So the idea would be to draw up a picture similar to this, which says, here's a business process. Here are all the different ways that it's being exercised by end users. Here are all the different devices that are involved in that particular process. Can I get a picture of this for all my critical business processes? Can I get a picture like this? And if I can, then I do understand the complexity. I understand all the different applications that are being used to fulfill a business function or a business process and its variations. And once you do that, you then exercise it like the end users would, right? So again, here the UI is critical. It's exactly what the world sees. And if you don't pay attention to that, you might face some unpleasant consequences, right? So end-to-end tests do require that you're able to handle modern complex UIs well with test automation, and that's something that's not easy to do. Okay? All right, let's stop here and see what you guys said about organizational structures. Okay, so organizational structure explains the teams and kind of operations required. That's one answer. Testing is usually decentralized under business units for packaged apps. Not sure I understand the question. Okay, maybe rephrase it. I'm sorry, I can't be that interactive in the webcast. I can ask the question and expect a response. So the reason I mention organizational structure is, I think, because of the decentralized distributed nature of it, right? So that answer is right. There's a lot of different set of people that are actually stakeholders in the end result, and those include your business leaders, those include your end users, those include your business analysts, your super users, they include your application deployment teams, they include your compliance teams, they include your QA and testing teams. All of them have to come together to actually make this succeed, right? So that's the complicating part, because all of the stakeholders have to be aligned together for you to deliver some piece of functionality into production, and then making sure that the understanding that each person has is the same, and making that transfer process transparent is critical, right? So we'll enter into some of those discussions just now, but it's critical to understand that organizational structure, because each of those people has a stake in the outcome, and if you don't pay attention to that, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to succeed. Okay, so a little more about UI testing, and again, right, a lot of you must have seen this pyramid, right? And I think for packaged applications, that pyramid gets inverted in the sense that the bulk of the testing will be UI based. Of course, you have to do some API testing for packaged apps, but it's not to the same extent that you would do if you're building your own custom application. Because once again, right, you hope that the vendor of the software has tested their APIs and the vendor of the software has tested their code. But what you are focused on is, can I put together 5 different applications and make sure that a business scenario end-to-end is working through the end user interface, right? So the UI testing is going to be the most significant part of all of your testing, followed by API and then some unit testing. So that pyramid gets inverted when you look at packaged applications versus custom code. And of course, the UI is evolving quite a bit. So if you look at modern UI, they are very dynamic, they're very customizable, and especially if you look at web-based applications, the way the pages are rendered, the way code generates UI, there might be 10,000 different ways to actually render a table, and each application does it in its own way. So handling that complexity is key, right? Being able to consistently identify objects and be able to interact with them on a screen is very difficult in this kind of environment, and making sure that your automation solution actually handles that well and can be tuned and customized in the field to handle that would be very critical when you look at UI-based testing. So here's an example, right? Here's an example of Fiori, right? Fiori has evolved. This is SAP Fiori. This is their modern UI. This is the web-based UI that they're moving to, and that has evolved constantly, right? So if you look at Fiori a couple of years ago versus Fiori in S/4HANA 15.11 versus Fiori in S/4HANA 16.10, those could be entirely different applications from the point of view of automated testing. So making sure that you understand that you have some way to uniquely identify objects and deal with the evolution of the user interface, and make sure that the automation is relevant every time a new release comes out is key to succeeding. Okay, so let's delve a little bit more into prioritizing test automation. And so here's how it works in terms of the stakeholders. Remember I talked about different stakeholders and the organization. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that the business is involved, right? And in order to involve the business, you've got to make automation easily accessible to the business, right? So instead of people sending you written documents or talking to you or spending hours with you, you've got to find a way to capture what they're doing without too much effort on their part, right? So again, when you look at test automation solutions, ease of use or the ability for non-technical people to at least build part of the automation is critical, right? Because this way you have 5,000 people working for you, doing your job, as opposed to you having to do everything with your test automation team. Of course, the application deployment teams are important, and then QA, right? Making sure that you are the quarterbacks pulling all of these things together and making sure everything works, and finally scaling up. So the scale part is again also critical, because how do you make sure that within a matter of 1 or 2 hours you are able to run entire suites of automation that test millions of business process steps? So those kind of priorities are something that you have to deal with, starting at the business, then dealing with application deployment, and then dealing with day-to-day operations once the software is deployed in the field. Okay, so here's a quick slide on defects in production. I know every one of us has seen this, and I just wanted to put it up here so that you can look at the cost, right? The cost of discovering a defect early on versus discovering that in production could be 10x, right? It's that important than to make sure that you get the right coverage so you're actually catching most of your defects before they hit production, because it could be 10x the cost to do it once they hit production, okay? All right, so let me summarize most of the things that I talked about. So one of the advantages of packaged applications is, hey, they work the same way for everybody. So you can actually use pre-built content, right? So you can actually pre-build automation for your core business processes and get that out of the box, right? So you don't have to build everything every time. You can get pre-built automation for a particular packaged application and just use it. Just customize it just like you customize the packaged application, right? So don't think about automation as redoing everything from scratch. Think about it as, I bought a packaged app, I also bought pre-built test automation for that packaged app. And then I'm going to customize that test automation and then pull the pieces together, right? So that's one part. The other is, right, enlist your end users in getting information through automated discovery, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Okay, the second part is, once you have all of this running, you need to do risk-based testing, which is filter changes, and filter what tests you need to run based on the changes that you're driving through the system. So one of the things you can do is you can automate the determination of risk. So given a set of functionality that you want to move into production, we can examine what has changed, and based on the changes that you're contemplating, we can tell you which business process are going to be impacted, and therefore what tests you need to run. So that actually filters out and gets things going much more quickly and addresses the right kind of risk mitigation for the changes you're making in production. And then the third part of this is, right, to get scale, you can use the cloud, right? So for example, you can automate the automation by deploying that on cloud machines. So you can set up 10, maybe 100, maybe 500 cloud machines, right? And then sprinkle the automation across those cloud machines so you can get done faster, okay? So use pre-built content, use automated discovery to quickly get to what you need to automate, filter based on risk, based on the changes and the analysis of the changes that you're driving into production, and then use the cloud to scale, right? Because you can spin up and spin down test labs in the cloud with no problem. It's not very expensive to do that. So just use the machines when you need them and then turn them down when you don't need them. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of transferable automation and how that works, in a practical environment, right? So what I want you to think about is, typically when we think of automation, we think of a very linear process, right? You first write test requirements, then you create documents, then somebody has to go automate that, you then run it into production, you then modify it, and so on, right? So that's a very linear way of doing automation. And what we are saying is, look at it in a completely different way. So look at an automation-first approach. So instead of writing a document and writing requirements, you start to automate first. So how do you do that, right? So make sure that your business can actually capture what they're doing easily, which then feeds into the automation. So if your end users in your business can turn on a piece of software that's watching what they do and automatically creating for them the end-to-end process flows, you can then transfer that over to the application team that can look at that and say, oh yeah, okay, now I see how the pieces fit together and how the business process works, and here's where I can use that to generate documents, right? And then your QA team can then say, okay, I know what the business is doing, I know how the functionality is supposed to work, so let me finish up the automation, right? So let me harden it, let me make sure that I can add in the variations, I can add in the data sets, I can add in the customizations, because now I understand what the business is trying to achieve, and therefore, as a professional, I know how to test it well, and therefore I can finish up the automation. And then the operations people can use what you have built and run it and deploy it, on multiple machines and run it as part of their standard DevOps environment, right? So that completes the full cycle, and each of them are working relatively independently of each other, and they're combining all that together all the time, right? So this whole decentralized, parallel way of doing it would get you much larger automation much faster and would scale up a lot better than you would do it if you just laid out everything in advance and followed that linear process. And this is also good because this continues to be current, right? So what happens is when things change, the business is recapturing the changed things, you're getting updated information, you're deploying updated automation, so everything kind of always stays current, right? Nobody has to manually do a bunch of things to restart the process. The process is always in play, always in motion, always churning, and that's the way you want to do it, because now you have built core infrastructure that always keeps your automation current, and that always makes sure that all stakeholders within those organizations are in sync and are able to contribute to the process. Okay, so I wanted to show you some examples of how this really works with Worksoft solutions. So this is, an automatically discovered business process in Worksoft solution called Analyze. And the way we got to this picture, remember I said, let the business users do what they normally do, and then let the software figure out what they're trying to do and draw up nice pictures for you. So that's what we do, right? Nobody had to sit down and draw this picture. We captured what end users did with packaged applications, multiple users, multiple applications, multiple locations, and we're able to then construct this end-to-end business process picture of what happened. So this is the first step toward understanding what's going on. From that, we are now able to create documentation. Now remember, it's flipped, right? Instead of creating documentation and then creating automation, we started with automation and then created documentation because we also automated the creation of documents, not just automated the testing of business processes. So we automated the creation of these pictures and we automated the creation of these documents, okay? And these just keep feeding into the whole test automation process, right? And so that's where you build the test. The other thing that you want to do is you want to leverage the ecosystem of things that already exist, right? So for us, we are building the automation piece of this, but integrating it into Jenkins or Jira or HPALM, and also reusing some of the automation that your developers have built into the operations process, right? So for example, your API test from SoapUI or Selenium, all of that gets incorporated into the orchestration mechanism so that end-to-end scenarios take advantage of every asset that you have within your automation framework. Okay, and so this is how the auto-generated tests look like, right? So from the business process discovery, we create automated documentation, but we also create automated tests. So everything that those end users did in those complex workflows gets transferred over into automated test steps, which you can execute immediately. And then now you can start building in your logic some of your business rules and also some of the more sophisticated data handling mechanisms to complete these tests. Okay. All right, so now let's think beyond test automation for packaged applications. Because if you look at the life cycle of a packaged application, a lot of the things that you do to build test automation can be used for other things too. So for example, if you're setting up a new system, how do you configure it? How do you load data into it? Because if you're drawing data from 5 other systems and entering it into your new system, well, automation can do it for you, right? You can just take data from the other systems, write a little automated test, if you will. I'm calling it a test, but it's not a test. You can write a little automated process to pull that data from other systems and preload your new system before you even start implementing something, right? You can use automation for compliance purposes. You can do that for role-based security. And since you're doing end-to-end business process tests, the same thing can be used for robotic process automation. So there are lots of manual activities that go on when people are executing packaged application-based business processes. The same things that you do to automate testing can now be used to automate the process itself in production, right? So this again, gives you a huge leg up because the same automation that you're using to understand business processes and document them is being used to automate testing, is being used for compliance, and is being used to optimize those processes in production by letting software robots run parts of those processes automatically without people having to do it, right? So if you take all of that together, you're going to make a significant impact on the entire life cycle of that packaged application project. And that's what I wanted you to think about is the work that you're doing for test automation can now be applied in many, many different ways that brings, incredible benefits to your company or your customers if you happen to be a systems integrator. Okay, and here's a real world example of what that could be, right? We were able to reduce significantly all aspects of a life cycle of a packaged application, real world projects here, where the realization we reduced by 29% in terms of the total man days of testing. Because we were able to focus on the right things to test in the final prep, we were able to improve by 28%. We reduced the hypercare period because of the coverage we already got and the fact that we tested the right things. So the hypercare period where, a lot of attention is being paid to a newly deployed application got cut by 70%, and a 30% total acceleration of the project. That's a big number, right? If you are able to cut 30% off of a packaged application project, that is huge, right? So again, the point here that I'm trying to make is this isn't some theory, right? This isn't some set of abstract things that we're talking about here. These are things we have learned from real customers. These are things that we have deployed at real customers and people that are forward-looking, people that are really interested in being nimble and being ready to adopt change are doing this every single day. So it's something that you can do today, right? None of the functionality, none of the aspects we talked about are futures. They're all available today. They're all available to be deployed. And therefore, you can go ahead and use them. And of course, we are available to answer any of your questions, whatever you have in terms of any aspect of what I've discussed. So the last slide is on Worksoft, and we provide automation that's focused on packaged applications, and we do all aspects of that I talked about, discovery, automation, documentation, testing, and RPA. And there are three key things you want to take away from this, right? Why would you do automation in the first place? What are the benefits that you can articulate to your company and your customers? Well, the first one is acceleration, right? Being able to actually do projects up to 40% faster. The second one is technology risk. This is critical because the more your business relies on technology, the more exposure you have. And being able to make sure that you're able to address that technology risk effectively is now a board level discussion in companies. And reducing that significantly up to 90%, is what people are able to achieve. And then, of course, finally, the last thing, but not least, is operational efficiency, right? What if you could cut 50,000 hours off of a project or 50,000 hours off of ongoing operations, What's the cost of that? What's the value of that? And what does that free you up to do, right? If you weren't spending 50,000 hours on non-productive activity, what could you do, right? How could you think about new things that advances your business, that makes you more competitive? So we give you that time back, to deal with things that you want to, not things that you have to. Okay, so with this, I'm open to questions. Please send over your questions now, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can.
All right, thank you, Shove. And now we will move into the Q&A section. As a reminder, you can use that question feature at any time to submit questions. Our first question, what are some typical challenges that people face when implementing DevOps for packaged applications?
So the most important challenge that people face, when implementing DevOps for packaged applications is basically understanding the operational aspects of DevOps, right? A lot of DevOps for custom development, the way people understand it, is very development focused, developer focused. I think the challenge for most of the packaged app side is dealing with the complex operations part of it, which means that you have to understand that you can't just deploy something into production, without really considering all of the consequences and without making sure it went through all the gates. So actually designing a DevOps environment that takes into account the second half of the process, which is how do I make sure that I haven't broken adjacent business functionality and getting it into production is one thing. And also how do I automate the approval process so that everybody that's a stakeholder can approve automatically. Those are the main challenges I think that people are facing when they're doing DevOps for packaged applications. Of course, this is a topic I could spend 3 days talking about, but for the webcast, yeah. So we have another question that is, how can we support testing for DevOps? Right? Again, the way you support testing for DevOps is you look at the overall DevOps cycle and you integrate your testing as part of that through different aspects, right? So one of the things that we allow you to do is actually build up test labs in the cloud that then become part of your DevOps toolchain. And so each time that you want to deploy functionality into production, you can invoke that test lab in the cloud, get the results back very quickly, and then move that over into your operations environment. Yeah.
Okay, our next question, kind of a follow-up to the first question asked. What's the biggest mistake you see people make when they approach QA for packaged applications?
I think, from my perspective, the biggest mistake people make are focusing too much on a single application functionality, right? You are not a software developer of the packaged app, and therefore it's not necessary for you to make sure that all aspects of that packaged app work in all ways. I think that's the single biggest mistake people make, is they spend too much time trying to test functionality of a single application that they shouldn't be worried about, and not focus enough on the business outcome that packaged application is delivering. And so if you don't use 90% of the functionality of a single application when you're testing that, that's a waste of time, right? And that's something that's very hard for people to understand because they grew up in the software development world, and they want to make sure that they apply that same principle to the package world. But those principles are entirely, completely, utterly different.
Does Worksoft test all business applications, or is it only for SAP?
Right. So this is what I call the Jim Carrey question, right? I don't know if you guys see Jim Carrey, right? I mean, he only does one kind of roles, so he gets typecast. And the answer to this question is no. Of course, we test every application imaginable on Earth. We happen to test SAP extremely well, and we happen to cover it better than anybody else in the world. But no, we test every single application. Our biggest deployments actually have nothing whatsoever to do with SAP. So we test web applications, we test .NET applications, we test Java applications, we test mobile applications, we test mainframe, we test APIs, we test everything in between. Because there's no other way to do this, right? If you're going to do end-to-end testing, you have to test every technology and every application, and we do that. And we do that quite well. So no, we're not just an SAP testing company.
Alrighty, our next question, what differentiates Worksoft solutions from some of the other test automation products that are on the market today?
So we have been, one thing that distinguishes us is I would say expertise and experience. We've been doing this for a long time. We have really focused on how to do automation better. We don't try to be all things to all people. Our core automation, our object action framework, our ability to build automation that's very easy to use, that can be deployed, at a very large scale, and that allows every person in your company to participate in constructing automation, I think is unique to us. The other thing that's unique to us is our automation doesn't break easily, right? So it lasts you for a long time. The reason you build automation is because you want to use it over and over again, otherwise why would you do it? And that's, I think, one thing that we excel at. And then the last thing is we've done this many times for some of the largest, most sophisticated global Fortune 1000 companies. So we know what we're doing. And everything that we have learned from all of that has actually built back into the product. And so you can take advantage of all of that experience, all of that expertise within our technology solutions.
Okay, we've had some great questions come in, and we do have time for a couple more. We had a question about where to get started with possible tutorials for Worksoft. One place I would definitely suggest is our Worksoft University page that you can get to from the Worksoft homepage. There's some great e-learning options there that you can take advantage of, and those are free at this time. So a number of courses that I would encourage folks to check out. We also have a great page on YouTube. We have a large collection of recorded webinars. All of that can also be found from the homepage. Our next question for Shob is Analyze included? We're a current Worksoft customer. Is Analyze included? What should we do if we're interested in looking at Worksoft Analyze?
Why don't you just contact Worksoft if you're looking at Analyze, and we'll make sure that your account representative or somebody actually contacts you and walks you through it. Worksoft Analyze is not included. If you have Worksoft certified, you do have to purchase that separately, but that's something that we can walk you through, and we can also show you the benefits and why you might want it.
All right, thank you, Shob, and thank you to everyone for attending. If we weren't able to get to your question, we'll be in touch with more information. As mentioned earlier, we will be sending you a link to a recording of the webinar, and if you're interested in learning more about Worksoft, please visit our website. Thank you for your time today. This concludes the webinar. Have a great day.